Good afternoon. I'm Bob Hobby, Director of Music here at Trinity English Lutheran Church. Typically, we would be welcoming people as we gather for our Fridays in May concert series. This is the first time since the beginning of our program in 1987 that we have no people present. Nevertheless, the music needs to continue. After contemplating a variety of options with my colleague Evan Anderson, we decided to offer virtual variations on the Fridays in May. Each Friday of this month, we will play organ arrangements that we have created, either improvisation or in composition form, based on hymn tunes that we've selected. Today, I will share a few remarks about the hymns that Evan has chosen to play, and next week, Evan will share a few morsels of insight about the hymns that I play. We hope that you might be able to join us each Friday, and we hope you might find musical enrichment and spiritual nourishment from our time together. Evan will begin our program today with his setting of the familiar hymn, "Joyful, joyful, we adore thee." I'm not sure if you've ever thought about this before, but Beethoven is one of a few famous composers who wrote a hymn tune. Of course, Beethoven didn't originally intend for the melody to be used as a hymn. It was written for his Ninth Symphony, premiered in 1824. Nevertheless, it picked up, it was a catchy tune, and it was adapted by others in the 19th century. The set of words that we here in the United States now typically sing with Beethoven's tune were written by Henry Van Dyke, a pastor, college professor, and author. It is believed that he penned these words around 1907. Van Dyke was a nature lover, and it comes out in his writing. Listen to the words from Joyful, Joyful. Field and forest, vale and mountain, flowery meadow, flashing sea, chanting bird and flowing fountain, call us to rejoice in thee. Given that his last name is Anderson, it is of no surprise that Evan has a fondness for Swedish hymns. So why not have one today? The words of Day by Day are among those of over 2,000 hymn texts written by Carolina Sandell Berg, some being written as early as when she was 13 years old. Although Lena, as she was frequently called, experienced a great deal of turmoil in her life, her texts generally reveal an unfading resilience and faith. According to hymnologist Paul Westermeyer, this hymn first appeared as an illustration to a story that Lena wrote. Permit me to share Westermeyer's synopsis of her story because I believe it's especially meaningful for us during these days. The story was about a clock that decided to stop. The dial decided to find out why and discovered that the pendulum had become bored and was tired of swinging back and forth 86,400 times each day. The dial suggested swinging 6 times. The pendulum found that to be acceptable, but said, it's not 6 times or 60, it's the thought of 6 million that disturbs me. To this, the dial responded, but bear in mind that while in a single moment you can think of the 6 million swings you must make in a lifetime, only one at a time will be required of you. And no matter how often you must go through the same movements, you will be given a moment for each one. The pendulum was convinced and went back to work. Sandell then said that, quote, it is foolish to put future burdens upon each present moment. We are given only a day at a time, and for each new day, new grace, new strength, new help, end quote. She quoted Deuteronomy 33, thy shoes shall be iron and brass, and as thy days, so shall thy strength be. Then she followed that with the text of this hymn. Here is the first stanza. Day by day, your mercies, Lord, attend me, bringing comfort to my anxious soul. Day by day, the blessings, Lord, you send me, draw me nearer to my heavenly goal. Love divine, beyond all mortal measure, brings to naught the burdens of my quest. Savior, lead me to the home I treasure, where at last I'll find eternal rest. Part of the popularity of Lena's words are due to a musician friend of hers, Oscar Anfeld. He was a composer, and he wrote the melody for these words as well as several others of hers. Originally pursuing the call into ministry to become a pastor, Oscar didn't finish his training. Rather, he decided to travel throughout much of Scandinavia, witnessing of his faith and singing with his guitar. And some of the songs that he sang were written by his dear friend, Lena. The words of "This is my Father's world" were taken from a poem written by Maltby Babcock. The poem exists in a collection of his various writings entitled Thoughts for Everyday Living. It was published in 1901. We happen to have 3 stanzas of the words in our hymnal. The original poem had 16 stanzas. Babcock was an East Coast American born in Syracuse, New York. He served several Presbyterian congregations in New York State and in Baltimore, and he even served at Johns Hopkins University. After his time in Baltimore, Babcock returned to New York City, where he succeeded Henry Van Dyke at Brick Presbyterian Church. Now, if you remember Henry Van Dyke and think, my, that sounds a little bit familiar, just 2 hymns ago, I was speaking of him. Remember, he's the one that wrote the words for "Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee," and he was succeeded by the pastor who wrote "This is my Father's world." The origin of the melody for "This is my Father's world" is a little less certain. Franklin Shepard, who was born in Philadelphia, included it in a Sunday school hymnal that he edited. It is possible that he either wrote the entire tune or that he derived it from an English folk melody that his mother shared with him as a child. In addition to his work as an editor, Shepard was a church musician, and he served on the editorial board for the Presbyterian hymnal, the one that was published in 1911. Since part of Shepard's life was also spent in Baltimore, it's very likely that the connection between Shepard and Babcock occurred during that time. The concluding hymn for today's program is newer to the repertoire of our hymnody. Sia Hamba, or the English translation, We Are Marching in the Light of God, surfaced in the United States roughly in the early to mid-1980s. Sia Hamba is a freedom song that comes to us from South Africa. It's a catchy tune which uses a simple repeated line of words over and over. Each line speaks of the physical things that we do as a community. We are marching in the light of God. We are marching in the light of God. We are marching, marching, marching. We are marching in the light of God. We are dancing in the light of God. We are praying in the light of God. We are singing in the light of God. It is highly unlikely that you would hear this hymn accompanied by the organ if you went to South Africa. Rather, it would be sung by all, old and young, unaccompanied, maybe with a few percussion instruments added, and maybe even singing it out from the church into the streets of the community. As Evan offers his energetic interpretation today to close this program, feel free to move about a bit wherever you are, and maybe we could even add an extra line of our own as we navigate these unique days in which we live. We are hopeful in the light of God. We are hopeful in the light of God. Hopeful, hopeful, hopeful. We are hopeful in the light of God. On behalf of Evan and myself, we want to thank you for joining us today for this program. We also would like to thank Joe Collins and Brian Eastman, who've helped us make it possible through the stream. Please join us again next Friday at 12:10, if you're able, for another virtual variation on the Fridays in May.